Hey everybody, it's Chris Eads, known online as Wootini, here with another Gay Gamer video podcast. Naturally, I've just been playing Zelda on my Switch this whole past week, so again, that's all I'm going to be talking about, just like last week's. However, last week's podcast, I had literally had the Switch for just a couple of days in my home, and while I'd gotten the case, I hadn't actually, played it portably in public or anything. I'd played in the bedroom or in the other chair, just so my husband could have the TV. But now I've gone an entire week, and I've actually brought it with me to work, and I was surprised I was able to play it on the subway. Now, because the Switch is, wide, like, the 3DS... I have no problem, like, especially with Animal Crossing, which is not, like, a, intensive game. Like, I can go like this and just play. So, and I can play and hold on to a pole or whatever and do my stuff, and, like, it's fine. And I don't mind holding this with one hand, because this feels real sturdy. Whereas the Switch, as you can see, is a bit wider. So when you're playing the Switch on the train, it's still fine. Like, it's not any wider than you. It's not a huge thing, and it's not heavy either. But I'm not comfortable, like, playing and like, taking my hand off it and grabbing this, because this doesn't... It just feels like it's too long, and it's too much weight on one side, and I'm just afraid I'll lose my grip. And oh my god, if I dropped this, I would die. So... Basically, I've only played it on the train when it's not super crowded, because if it's super crowded, then you're like this, and it's like, you can't really see what you're doing. And you also can't always, hold on to a pole or something. And so when it's not too crowded, and I can actually stand against the wall of the train, then I can, like, lean back, and then I can use both hands. One time I even got a seat. That hardly ever happens. So that was fine, and I could play perfectly. But the problem is my commute isn't terribly long, so I don't really get to do much, and then all of a sudden I'm where, I'm at my destination, and I'm like, ah, crap, and I have to pause it and go to work. If I'm on my way home, it's fine, because I can just pick up where I left off when I got home, which is what actually had to happen once, because I was trying to play it, and I hit a point where I was working on freeing one of the divine beasts, and it took a lot of mid-air arrow shots at specific targets, and I started doing it, and I'm like, this isn't working, because I use the motion controls to kind of finesse the aiming a little. Like, I'll get myself there, and then I can go like this, just tilt it ever so slightly, but, like, I'm, like, getting all into it, because it's like, and I was like, it's too crowded on this train, I'm gonna elbow somebody, and that'll be rude, so, and I kept missing, so I was like, you know what, turn it off, go home, pop it into the dock, play it on the TV, and it was much easier. I mean, it wasn't easy, but it was easier. I also have not yet run into any problems with the battery, because like I said, my commute is not too long. And I know that with Zelda, the Switch battery will only last a couple of hours, but I've yet to sit and play for a couple of hours. Like at the laundromat the other weekend, I sat and played for well over an hour, and had no problems with it. And I also noticed that I do tend to leave the Joy-Cons on the Switch overnight, but I don't feel like that's even really necessary, because on the weekends, I leave them plugged into the puppy dog controller, and they, like, there's little lights on either side that show you the charging level, and I've never seen them go below the top level. Like, they've never lost enough charge to even switch down one light. So, the Joy-Con batteries are fantastic. Obviously, if I was taking a longer trip, going out to Massachusetts on a 4-hour bus ride, I would have to hope that my Greyhound had a working power outlet so that I could plug my Switch in and keep playing. But so far, I'm super pleased with the portability. Playing the game portably on the tablet screen, I've had no problems except for, like I said, that one bit where I was like, I'm having a little trouble with the aiming. Let me do it on a bigger screen with the proper controller setup, and we'll see what happens. And then, as far as Zelda, I was super impressed because I don't want to spoil things, so I'm not going to get into specifics, but I was very pleased with myself for freeing one of the Divine Beasts and beating that boss battle. Now, mind you, I did beat it by the skin of my teeth, and I had a fairy on me so that when I died I came back to life, and then I, like, ate some more food that I had made that gave me, like, a defense bonus and extra hearts, so that I had, like, twice as many hearts, because I needed them. I got really close to death, and I was just like, crap! But luckily, I got in one more shot and he died, because he was shooting laser beams at me that were like, I could not avoid them. I couldn't figure out where I was supposed to go to avoid these laser beams, and I was like, oh well. So, luckily I just made it. But it was, I got suddenly this big super boost of confidence, and I'm like, woohoo, this is great. And, I just decided to explore the next area, figuring, you know, because it's like, Hyrule, it's like, here's the center of Hyrule where you started, and here's, you know, Castle Hyrule where you want to go at the end, and I started with Zora's Domain over here, and I figured I can just fan my way across Hyrule, work my way around, and then up, you know, and it'll be fine. So I go to the next area to the north, and I see this, like, mini-boss, because there's these, like, mini-bosses that are just sort of out and about in various places, and he was just laying there asleep, and he was like this big round guy with like a pig face, and I thought, okay, and I snuck up on him, got in a few hits, he stood up and turned around, I'm all ready to like jump aside and slash and attack and whatever. He goes like this, and just crushes me in his giant hands. I had a half a heart left, and I was just like, run away, run the F away. And luckily I managed to get far enough away that he gave up chase and turned around and went back. And I was like, okay, I'm not ready for that. And I was like, let me just climb up here and see if I can activate this tower and map out the area. And I got up to the tower, and there was like this flying drone-like guardian that spotted me and started shooting laser beams at me, and I'm like, crap! And I tried fighting it, and I was barely making a dent, and I'm like, okay, I don't have the right weapons for this, and it killed me really quickly, so I was like, I'm not going to keep trying with various weapons. I'm like, I feel like this area is not ready. I'm not ready for this area yet. And that's one of my only complaints about this new Zelda game is because it's so open, you can find yourself wandering into a section of the map where all of a sudden the enemies are getting like really, really difficult. And you have to turn around and go back because you're not ready for this yet. But I am also very curious how the gameplay is going to work because I'm wondering if, like, because I went to Zora's Domain first. That's what the guides were saying. They were like, start with this one. And I was like, okay, and it was fine, and it was perfectly lovely. But if I had gone to, like, the Goron area first, would I have been able to do it? Because I'm in the Goron area now, and the enemies are tougher. And I'm wondering, like, would they not have been as tough? Like, do the enemies level up with you? Or are you meant to kind of go in a specific order? Because, like, I can't tell. And I'm just like, so when I get to the next... Like, if I had done the other 3 bosses and finished with the Zora's Domain one, would that have been easier because I would have had amazing weapons and tons of hearts, and, you know, I would have just whooped its butt, you know? And if I had started on one of the other ones, would that have been too difficult, you know? Like, I don't know how that's actually supposed to work. Because the difficulty level is very variable in this game. Like, but I will say that one of the game's greatest strengths is also one of its, for me, biggest weaknesses. The realism that they keep trying to impose on the game is somewhat frustrating. Like, when you're low on hearts, you can't just slash some grass and get some free hearts and rupees. You have to, like, kill animals and cook food and get your hearts back that way, because you have to, it's more realistic to cook the meat and eat it and get your hearts back. Although, weirdly, you do find rupees under rocks, so there's still random rupees around. But, like, you know, I also am annoyed when there's a lightning storm, you have to put away all your metal weapons, and I was actually, like, stuck out in a rainstorm, and I put away my metal weapons, and I'm like, okay, let me just stand here under this cliff and, like, try not to get hit by lightning. And I joked on Twitter, I'm like, hopefully my Zora armor doesn't attract lightning. And somebody was like, no, just put away your weapons. And another person's like, actually, yes, it does. Because, I mean, there's clearly visibly metal things, but when I went into the inventory, those pieces of armor didn't sparkle. So I'm hoping that armor doesn't have the same thing as, you know, the shields and the weapons and the bows and swords and things. But then somebody on Twitter said that it does, and I'm like, oof, good thing I didn't get zapped, because I would have died. I do appreciate that, you know, when it's raining, it's easier to sneak up on enemies, because they can't hear you in the pouring rain. And then there's also things where, like, the physics of the game let you solve problems in various different ways. You know, it's like, oh, well, I can't fly onto this area that's surrounded by thorns. That was my obvious solution. It didn't work. So I was like, well, what the heck? And I'm like, well, can I burn the thorns? You can. Just FYI, spoiler alert, if there's thorns, set fire to them and they go away. That's my free tip for Breath of the Wild, which you probably already knew about it. But I am a little concerned with the wild variations in difficulty levels throughout this game so far, that I'm going to hit a point where it's just going to get too hard, and I'm going to get stuck, and I'm going to get frustrated, and I'm not going to finish it. Because that's what happens to me a lot with video games, is I'll get to a boss that I just can't beat, and then I put the game away, and I say, I'll come back to it later. I'll play this instead. But then I never go back to it. Because it's so frustrating, I just turn it off. And I'm just like a petulant child. I'll take my controller and go somewhere else. I mean, at least it's an open world, so if I do find a place where I'm not strong enough, I can be like, well, I'll just go over here then, you know, and try something else. But so far I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying Zelda so much so that this past week, Hello Games announced that they were releasing the Pathfinder update for No Man's Sky, which is a huge update. It adds a whole new camera mode and, like, camera filters, and, like, it, like, ups the graphics somehow, which it was already pretty, but somehow apparently the game gets even prettier. It changes some other things with bases and whatever, but it also adds vehicles, and I'm just like, oh my god, all this new stuff. And I have not even turned on No Man's Sky to try it, because when I get home from work, I want to play some Zelda. So, I will endeavor to play some No Man's Sky at some point during this next week, so that next week I will have that to talk about instead of Zelda, because I can't keep just talking about Zelda every week. Like, nobody... Do you guys really want to come back every week to, like, listen to me say, here's what I did in Zelda this past week? So I don't want to make it just a Zelda update. So, come back next week, and I promise I'll talk about something other than Zelda. I'll still talk about Zelda, probably, because something big will have happened, but I'll talk about something else, too. Oh! I almost forgot! I should have started off the podcast with this like I usually do, with a movie review. This past weekend, I saw Kong Skull Island. It's awesome. If you love watching giant monsters beat the living hell out of each other, while tiny humans run in fear for their very lives and sometimes get squished or blown up, It's so much fun. I kind of wish that I'd been able to see it in 3D, and I almost want to go back and see it, like, next week in 3D, because there were so many shots where I was like, oh, that would look so good in 3D. But my husband hates 3D, so we went to a matinee of 2D. But it's super great, and the ending gives me hope that this next Godzilla movie that they're doing will actually be a proper Godzilla movie, and not that BS Godzilla movie that we got, that was all about the people, with, like, a couple of shots of Godzilla here and there towards the end. Because when we watch a monster movie, we want to see giant monsters destroying things. And we want to see the monster. And that's what's good about Kong, is you really see him, and you see him fighting and smashing and doing awesome things. So, thumbs up for that. And if you like monster movies, definitely check that one out. So now I'm done, and I will see you next week. Alright? Bye!